What if the gods the ancient Sumerians worshipped weren't just mythological figures, but actual visitors from the stars? This is the question that has divided archaeologists, historians, and theorists for decades, and perhaps the answer is much closer than we imagine. When we talk about the Anunnaki, we are talking about humanity's oldest mystery, one that defies time, science, and faith. Were they really creator gods, or beings from another world, the true alien gods who shaped Earth's destiny? Imagine a civilization so ancient that even Egypt seems recent in front of it, a society that suddenly appeared out of nowhere, bringing with it advanced mathematics, precise astronomy, and a writing system that no one had invented before. The Sumerians didn't just build cities and temples, they recorded in stone stories about beings who descended from the sky in ships of fire and taught humanity everything it knew. But who were these masters? And why, in every corner of the world, from the pyramids of Egypt to the temples of Central America, do we find the same symbols, the same stories, the same figures of winged giants looking up at the sky? Their name is Anunnaki, and, according to the oldest clay tablets ever found, they were responsible for creating man in their image and likeness. Does this sound familiar to you? It is almost impossible not to think of parallels with later sacred texts. Is the Genesis of the Bible just a simplified version of something that happened thousands of years before? A cosmic truth rewritten in religious language to hide what really happened? But there is something even more intriguing. In several cuneiform translations, we find mention of a distant star, a lost planet called Nibiru, from where the Anunnaki would have come. According to legend, they descended to Earth to extract precious resources, especially gold, not just for wealth, but to sustain their own planet's atmosphere. And that's where the mystery deepens. How could a civilization from 6,000 years ago have knowledge of astronomy, metals, and atmospheric engineering, something that we only understand in the 21st century? Coincidence? Or proof of real extraterrestrial contact? As you hear these words, think about something. What if everything we call mythology was actually memory? Fragments of a true story, passed down from generation to generation until it became legend. The ancients did not have the science to explain the impossible, so they called gods what they could not understand. And perhaps in place of temples, the gods left technological clues hidden beneath the sands of time. Gravity-defying ruins, stone cuts impossible for primitive tools, astronomical alignments too precise for chance. It all seems to tell a single story. We were never alone. And if it's true that the Anunnaki created humanity, what does that say about who we really are? Are we descendants of gods or space explorers? Perhaps this is the reason why the world's greatest powers are still interested in excavations in ancient Mesopotamia. What are they really looking for there? Lost knowledge or extraterrestrial technology buried millennia ago? The texts say that the Anunnaki promised to return when the cycle was complete. Is it a coincidence that right now, modern science is detecting strange signals coming from distant regions of our solar system? And before you say this is all just theory, remember, in every myth there is a trace of truth, and what we're about to reveal will make you rethink everything you thought you knew about the origins of humanity. So tell me, do you really believe we are the first chapter in Earth's history? Or are we just a continuation of something much older, much more powerful, and perhaps much more alien than we ever imagined? Leave a like right now if you also feel that there is something hidden in the shadows of our own history. And right here in the comments, I want to discover the hidden truth, because what comes next will show you what the history books never told about the gods who descended from the sky. If you've come this far, it's because something inside you also feels that there are truths hidden behind the walls of history. And that's why I want to invite you to go further. Because this video is not just another theory about gods and aliens, it's an invitation to understand what really happened at the beginning of human civilization. Every detail you just heard was based on records, symbols, and evidence that the world chose to ignore. And when you understand the content, you not only awaken, you begin to see the hidden pattern that connects all ancient cultures, all religions, and even today's scientific advances. Therefore, I want you to leave your like right now. It seems like a simple gesture, but it is what helps this investigation continue, which makes the algorithm bring this truth to more people who, like you, are looking for answers beyond the obvious. Your like is the fuel that keeps this search for truth alive. And take the opportunity to subscribe to the channel, because in the next parts of this series, we will explore what archaeologists found in the ruins of Ur and Nippur, evidence that the Anunnaki may have left more than just legends, perhaps a message for the future, and you need to be here to see this firsthand. Now comment below on a phrase that will mark anyone who is part of this journey. I am ready to discover the hidden truth of the Anunnaki. This way, I will know that you are with me on this quest. Leave a like, subscribe, and activate the bell, because the next revelation, the one that connects the ancient gods, astronauts, and human DNA, will make you question everything you've ever believed about who we really are. The Sumerian records are a portal, a silent portal made of clay and symbols that survived more than 6,000 years of oblivion. Each line carved into the tablets is like a whisper from the past, an attempt by an ancient civilization to tell the future something it itself may not have fully understood. And it is here, at this point, that the mystery of the Anunnaki begins to take shape, not as a simple legend, but as a story that echoes in everything that humanity built afterwards. Think for a moment. How could such an ancient civilization emerge so suddenly, with advanced knowledge in writing, astronomy, agriculture, and complex social laws? Before the Sumerians, humanity lived in a tribal way, hunting and gathering. Then, almost out of nowhere, cities flourished, mathematics appeared, and men began to build temples to beings who came from heaven and taught us everything we knew. There is no logical break in the evolutionary line. There is a jump, a leap so big that even today scholars are unable to explain it without resorting to the impossible. Ancient texts speak of Anu, the king of the heavens, Enlil, the lord of winds and authority, and Enki, the god of waters, wisdom and creation. But what is most intriguing is that the Sumerians themselves describe these beings not as spiritual entities, but as physical, tangible figures who lived among them, with homes, councils, and even political disputes. They were portrayed with wings, not as angels, but as beings with flight technology. In several sculptures, what appears to be a simple adornment can actually represent pressure suits, helmets, and even energy devices. The gods who descended from the sky taught men to observe the stars, divide time, record history, and control nature. And at the same time, they asked for something in return: obedience, devotion, and work. They needed gold, that precious metal that still arouses humanity's greed to this day. Gold, according to the texts, was the reason the Anunnaki came, and the essential element that forced them to create a race capable of helping them. Humanity would have been shaped not by chance, but by necessity. Man would be a hybrid species, born from the mixture between the blood of the gods and the clay of the earth. Now think about it with me. Why do so many ancient cultures in different parts of the world have almost identical stories about creator gods coming from the stars? The Mayans spoke of celestial men. The Egyptians revered Osiris and Isis, coming from specific constellations, and even in Hindu scriptures, the Vimanas, vehicles of the gods, are described in impressive detail, similar to spaceships. Is it a coincidence? Or were all these civilizations describing the same visitors, each in their own way? The point is that the pattern repeats itself. There is always a group of superior beings coming from far away who intervene in human destiny. There is always a sudden knowledge, a break in the natural line of progress. And there is always the same ending. The gods disappear, promising to return one day. This narrative is universal. What changes are the names, languages, and symbols. But the essence, the contact between the human and the celestial, remains identical. When we look at the map of ancient Sumerian cities, something becomes evident. Their main buildings, the ziggurats, were not ordinary religious temples. They functioned as astronomical observation points, precisely aligned with the constellations. Sumerian priests believed that this was where the gods ascended and descended. In other words, the ziggurats were possibly landing strips, energetic structures used as connecting portals between worlds. The most disturbing thing is that the Sumerians did not see the Anunnaki as perfect beings. On the contrary, they were powerful, but also flawed, passionate, jealous. They fought among themselves, manipulated humans, and fought for control of the earth like someone fighting for a lost throne. This contradictory nature of the gods is what makes many scholars believe that the Anunnaki were not spiritual beings, but aliens with intentions of their own, much more human than we would like to admit. Now imagine living back then. Look at the sky and see the chariots of fire crossing the sky, hearing bangs and feeling the earth shake when the gods descended. There were no words to describe technology, only metaphors. Everything that was unknown became sacred, and so the myth was born. But what masquerades as myth may in fact be a record of something very real. There is something curious that many do not know. On several tablets, there are references to celestial measuring instruments, described as all-seeing eyes, and to objects that flew high like birds, but shone like the sun. If we translate this into modern language, what sounds like ancient poetry starts to sound like descriptions of technology. Telescopes, drones, or even spaceships. The past begins to seem frighteningly modern. The Anunnaki were also described as giants, beings of stature far above ordinary humans, endowed with strength and longevity. And it is interesting to note that fossils of abnormal skeletons with non-standard proportions have already been found in several excavations in the Middle East and Central America, and quickly removed by official teams. Some claim that these findings were suppressed so as not to rewrite the entire story of human origins. And this is where everything starts to connect. If the Anunnaki created man to serve them and then disappeared, what happened to them? Have they left, or are they still among us, observing in silence? There are those who say that human DNA contains inexplicable genetic marks, a sequence of codes that does not fit into natural evolution. Could this be proof that we still carry within us the signature of the star gods? Now tell me, and if this is all real, what does this change in the way you see humanity? Isn't our quest for technology, power, and dominance, deep down, a reflection of what we inherit from them, a genetic echo of our own alien origins? Comment below if you believe that we are the result of natural evolution or the creation of extraterrestrial beings. Write the phrase, "The truth is in the stars," if you also feel that there is something that history never wanted us to know. And don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, because what comes next will show you the secret that the gods themselves tried to erase from Earth. When we think about the possibility that the Anunnaki are still among us, watching every step of modern humanity, it is impossible not to shiver. After all, if they really existed, if they really came down from the heavens and shaped man in their image, what would stop these same beings from remaining here, hidden behind the masks of time, infiltrated in the lines of power, in the richest and most influential families on the planet? This idea may seem absurd at first glance, but when we analyze the patterns in history, the evidence accumulates. And it is at this point that the line between myth, power, and control begins to blur in a dangerous way. Ancient texts describe the Anunnaki as absolute masters of knowledge, beings capable of manipulating not only matter, but also the mind. They mastered the secret of energy, alchemy, and cosmic laws, knowledge that was passed on only to a chosen few, the so-called priest kings. And it is curious to see how, over the centuries, this same pattern of restricted knowledge is repeated. Secret orders, closed societies, temples, religions, all claiming to hold a truth that must not be revealed to the common man. Maybe it's not a coincidence. Perhaps these ancient elites were, in reality, direct heirs to the Anunnaki legacy. Many scholars believe that the power of the gods was never just physical, but symbolic. They implanted in humanity something that science is still trying to understand: the notion of hierarchy, dominance, and worship. They created a social structure based on obedience and fear, a direct reflection of the way they governed their own colonies. This is why the figure of the celestial gods always appears as the one who imposes order, rewards loyalty, and punishes rebellion. And the most fascinating or frightening thing is that this dynamic is still alive today, disguised under other names. Note: in almost all civilizations, political and religious leaders are portrayed as descendants of the gods. Pharaohs, emperors, popes, kings, all claim to have divine blood, a direct connection to heaven. Does this seem like a coincidence or continuity to you? What if these leaders were not just using the name of the Anunnaki, but actually carried fragments of the blood of those who came from the stars in their DNA? Perhaps the descendants of these ancient gods never left power. They just changed their form, adapting to the modern era. Now imagine this scene: a temple excavated in the middle of the desert. Inside, a chamber sealed for thousands of years. On the walls, symbols identical to those found in cultures separated by oceans and centuries. In the center, a winged figure carved in gold. Half man, half something that doesn't fit into anything known. Below it, inscriptions that speak of the return of the Lords of Light. The archaeologist who made this discovery mysteriously disappeared a few days later. Local authorities claimed the structure had collapsed, but colleagues say he had sent a message before disappearing. They don't want the world to know. And would you, in his place, have the courage to reveal to the world something that could completely change our understanding of the origins of humanity? Or would you keep the secret, afraid of the consequences? There are those who say that the legacy of the Anunnaki is not just in the ancient ruins, but in the very technology we use today. From the mastery of metal to silicon circuitry, each advance feels like a distant echo of rekindled ancient knowledge. It's as if we were unconsciously trying to reproduce what the gods did with ease. And perhaps that is why, at each step of our scientific evolution, we feel like we are rediscovering something, not inventing it. The space race, genetic engineering, artificial intelligence, are they attempts to regain lost power? The Sumerians said that the gods created man to lighten his burden, a hard-working, obedient breed programmed to serve. If we look at today's world, with its controlled systems, manipulated economies, and a society that works tirelessly to sustain an invisible top, it is difficult not to see the same pattern. They change the names, they change the tools, but the structure is identical. Humanity continues to serve something, or someone, who may still be in charge. There is a curious detail. In several ancient tablets, the Anunnaki were described as divided between factions. Enlil, the authoritarian, believed that humans should be controlled, used as tools. Enki, on the other hand, saw potential in humanity and wanted to free it. This rivalry may have been the origin of the concept of good and evil, light and darkness, which shapes all religions to this day. In other words, perhaps they are not spiritual forces, but rather ancient disputes between real beings with opposing views on the destiny of man. What if the echoes of that war were still happening? What if the shadows that move the modern world were descendants, ideological or literal, of these two opposing sides? Think about it. every empire that fell, every revolution, every new world order? What if everything was a reflection of a battle that began millennia ago between the gods of the earth? Science tries to discredit these ideas, labeling them mythology, conspiracy theory, fantasy. But the truth is that there are too many holes in our history to simply ignore. Documents disappear. Archaeological finds are destroyed by accident. Witnesses are silenced. It's as if a silent force wants to keep humanity in the dark, preventing it from remembering who it really is. And perhaps this is the most disturbing secret of all. The Anunnaki never left. They mixed, they adapted, they became our gods, our rulers, our heroes. And if they observe from above, it is because they know that if man discovers the truth, nothing will be the same again. Now I want you to think and comment sincerely. If you knew that we were created by beings from another world, who could still be in charge, what would you do? Would you write your own story or continue serving in silence? Leave your like now, because it shows that you are one of the few who seeks to understand what lies beyond the surface. And in the comments, write the phrase, "I see the gods behind the story." So I know you are ready to continue this journey. Sign up too, because in the next part we will go into the physical evidence, the signs left on rocks, in the skies, and perhaps inside our own bodies. What if I told you that the evidence of the Anunnaki presence was never really hidden, but only before our eyes, distorted, reinterpreted, or simply ignored? Everything you will hear now is part of a puzzle that humanity has been trying to put together for millennia. The pieces are scattered throughout temples, stones, manuscripts, and even on the human body itself. But when you connect them, the image that emerges is too disturbing to accept easily. The image of a humanity created, shaped, and controlled by gods who came from the stars. The ancient Sumerians called these beings those who descended from heaven. And the most curious thing is that, in their texts, they did not speak of divine creation in the spiritual sense. They talked about science, gene manipulation, of a literal fusion between the blood of the gods and earthly matter. Clay tablets describe Enki and Ninmah mixing the sacred essence of the gods with clay from the earth to create the first functional human being. The detail is that the inscriptions are too specific to be symbolic. They mention substances, mixtures, and failed attempts, beings born deformed, others unable to reproduce. Only after many experiments, they say, was the perfect man created. Now stop and think with me. How could a civilization from 6,000 years ago describe something that sounds so similar to modern scientific language? DNA, genetic code, biological manipulation, concepts that we only fully understood a few decades ago. And yet the Sumerians already spoke about this in detail. Is it a coincidence? Or are we facing clear evidence of extraterrestrial genetic engineering? Man would have been created to serve. This phrase appears repeatedly in translations. Humanity's purpose would be to alleviate the gods' heavy work in extracting gold and other resources. But what stands out is that at a certain point, the text changes tone. Enki, the god of wisdom, begins to see human beings as something more. He believes that man can evolve, learn, create, free himself. This is the seed of free will, the moment when the creature begins to question the creator, and what happened afterwards seems to echo to this day. The other gods, led by Enlil, were furious at the humans' disobedience. They decided to punish them with catastrophes, pestilence, and floods. Humanity almost became extinct, a story that sounds incredibly familiar, doesn't it? The same flood that appears in the Bible, in Babylonian texts, and even in American and Asian traditions. In all of them, there is a common point: the gods who destroyed humanity, and a chosen one who survived to start over. The question is, why would so many different civilizations tell the same story, separated by oceans and eras? The simplest answer would be coincidence, but the most logical thing, and at the same time the most disturbing, is that they were all narrating the same real event, observed from different points on the planet. A global catastrophe caused by a dispute between the gods themselves. Now imagine for a second what would happen if these stories were all fragments of a larger truth. What if the flood wasn't just a punishment, but a way for the Anunnaki to restart their genetic experiment, erase what went wrong and start again, create a more obedient, more controllable humanity? What if modern man was the result of this second version? There is strange evidence that supports this hypothesis. Human DNA contains sequences that scientists call junk DNA, pieces that have no known function but that appear to have been added or modified at some point in the past. What many ignore is that within these mysterious regions there are repeated patterns, as if they were coded signatures. Some independent geneticists have suggested that they may be hallmarks of artificial interference, the kind of thing that would never result from natural mutations. And the most interesting thing is that the Sumerian texts talk about exactly this, the touch of the gods in human blood. They describe the gods taking pride in having placed the heavenly spark within man, a spark that would make him different from all other creatures on earth. And this spark, according to legends, is what we call consciousness today. Do you see how it all fits together? It's as if modern science was just confirming, step by step, what the ancients already knew. What we call evolution may have been, in fact, a sequence of cosmic experiments carried out by beings who saw the Earth as a laboratory. What if I told you that in some temples of ancient Mesopotamia, representations were found that show human figures being manipulated by instruments similar to medical tools? Some images show reptilian-looking beings holding something that resembles a double helix, exactly the shape of the DNA molecule. How could such an ancient civilization have represented this without understanding what it meant? The most disturbing thing is that, after the creation of man, the texts say that the gods began to argue among themselves about the future of the new species. Some believed that man should be free, others wanted to keep him under eternal surveillance. This division is what appears to have given rise to the war between the Anunnaki themselves. And this is where the mystery reaches another level. There are reports that some of these beings fled to other regions of the earth, taking knowledge and technology with them. They would have founded new civilizations in Egypt, Central America, Asia, leaving identical marks on all of them. These civilizations flourished and disappeared mysteriously. But they all carried the same message. The gods will come from the stars and return one day. This phrase, found in hieroglyphics and tablets, echoes in myths from various cultures. What if the return is not a spiritual metaphor, but a literal event? It's impossible not to think that perhaps the cycle is repeating itself. That modern humanity, with its technology, its arrogance and its destruction of the planet itself, is about to relive the same fate that ancient men experienced. Perhaps the natural catastrophes that increase every year, the signs in the sky, and the discoveries that science cannot explain, are the prelude to something much bigger. What if the gods are about to come back to see what we've done with their inheritance? If we are being watched, analyzed, judged, just like before? These questions are not just theory. They touch something instinctive within us, an ancestral memory that we cannot erase. A feeling that we have stood before creators before, and that one day we will again. Now comment below if you believe that our origin was an accident of nature or the result of a cosmic project. Write the phrase, "I carry the blood of the stars," if you also feel that there is something more in us, something that comes from far beyond Earth. And don't forget to like and subscribe, because what comes next will reveal the hidden code that proves that human DNA is the true signature of the gods. Human DNA has always been a mystery, Modern science likes to claim that it understands it, but there is something between the lines, something that laboratories cannot explain, as if a part of our origin was encoded there, dormant, waiting for the right moment to be awakened. And perhaps this lost part of our history is not just scientific, but cosmic. Since man learned to think, he feels that he came from another place. This feeling of not belonging, of being passing through, of looking at the sky and looking for answers, perhaps it is not just emotion, but genetic memory, a trace of what the ancient Sumerians called the blood of the gods. In the clay tablets found in the ruins of Nippur and Eridu, there are passages that describe the creation of man as an experiment. The gods mixed the blood of Anu with the clay of the earth. Think about the meaning of this. We are not talking about poetry, but about biological manipulation. The clay may well represent organic matter, and the blood of Anu, the genetic material of the Anunnaki. This metaphor gains strength when we remember that the term Adamu, used by the Sumerians to refer to the first man, literally means he made of the earth. But earth, according to the texts, was not the only ingredient. Something from outside was added, something heavenly, and that's where the most disturbing point of all comes in. Within our DNA, there are sequences that do not correspond to any natural explanation of evolution. They do not appear in any other life form on Earth, as if they were placed there deliberately. Some independent scientists call this an alien signature, and when we look at what the ancient texts describe, this hypothesis seems less absurd than simple coincidence. The Sumerians knew what they were saying. They didn't just record creation stories. They left instructions, warnings, and perhaps even keys to deciphering who we are. Now, imagine for a moment that all of this is true, that inside each cell of yours there is a fragment of something that does not belong to this world. May this divine spark of the Anunnaki be not just symbolic, but literal. Perhaps this is why humanity has always sought the impossible: to fly, to create life, to defy time, to dominate fire, metal, energy. It's as if we're trying to get back to where we came from, as if an ancient voice inside us is constantly whispering, "You were made in our image, and you have not yet discovered your true power." There is a detail that few notice. The shape of the DNA molecule is a double helix, two strands that intertwine, rising in a spiral. This same symbol appears repeatedly in ancient civilizations, long before modern science discovered it. In Egypt, two intertwined snakes symbolized life and knowledge. In Mayan temples, double spirals represent the connection between man and the cosmos. In Sumer, Enki's staff was adorned with two intertwined serpents, exactly the shape of DNA. How could people so distant and separated by millennia share the same symbol if there was no common origin, a heritage that transcends cultures? What emerges is a universal history, an echo of the past left as a trace. Perhaps human DNA is more than biological code. It is the true testimony of the Anunnaki, a message written not in stone, but within us. And perhaps, when we learn to decipher completely inside the genetic code, what we will find will not just be information about the human body, but a star map, a record of where we came from. Think about it. What if the answers about the ancient gods lie not in the ruins or in the pyramids, but within our own blood? What if humanity is, literally, the greatest alien artifact on Earth? This idea, although disconcerting, makes sense when we observe human behavior. Unlike any other species, we seek the divine, we create religion, philosophy, and science. It is as if we are condemned to seek the Creator, not by faith, but by instinct. It's as if we know on some level that He is not far away, but within us. But why would the Anunnaki do this? Why create an intelligent, emotional, and questioning race? Legends say that the gods wanted workers, but perhaps the true purpose was more complex. Perhaps they needed successors, a race that would inherit Earth as they moved on to other worlds. a kind of extension of themselves, adapted to the planet, but carrying fragments of their own DNA. If that's true, then we are children of the stars, literally. This hypothesis would also explain one of the greatest mysteries of modern archaeology, the sudden leap in human consciousness. Around 50,000 years ago, man stopped being just a hunter and began to create, think, build, worship. It is as if a light had suddenly been turned on, transforming a primitive being into a thinking being. What if this light was, in fact, the awakening of genetic information left behind by the Anunnaki? Many ancient texts say that after creating man, the gods breathed life into his soul. Perhaps this breath was not metaphorical. Perhaps it was the moment the code was activated, the moment humanity gained consciousness, the difference between existing and knowing it exists. Since then, man has looked up to the sky as if something was calling him back. Scientists call this natural curiosity. But what if it's ancestral nostalgia? What if it's genetic instinct trying to reconnect us to our cosmic origins? Maybe that's why we explore space so obsessively. We're trying to get home. And there is more. In many ancient cultures, spiritual initiation rituals involved blood. Blood was seen as a carrier of the soul, of divine energy. The term sacred bloodline itself originates from the belief that blood carries celestial power. This echoes directly in the myth of the Anunnaki, the lords of the royal blood. If DNA is the vehicle of the divine, then preserving the purity of that blood has always been the goal of elites who claim descent from the gods. Now think about the implications of this. If we really inherited extraterrestrial genetic fragments, could humanity be slowly transforming itself again? Is evolution not just biological, but spiritual, a kind of programmed return to the original state? Perhaps the awakening that so many spiritual traditions describe is not something mystical, but biological. DNA, after all, is a living machine, capable of reacting, mutating, awakening. What if this awakening is near? What if what we are experiencing now, crises, technological advances, astronomical discoveries, is part of this process? Maybe the gods don't need to come back because they never left. They are within us, and we are beginning to remember. Now, I want to know what you think about this. Do you believe that human DNA is just an evolutionary accident or a coded message left by creators? Leave a like if you feel that there is something greater connected to our origin, and comment on the phrase, "I carry the code of the gods." If you also believe that the true secret of humanity is in the blood and not in the stars. If there is a point where all the paths of history converge, it is in the ancient structures that the Anunnaki left behind. Monuments that stand the test of time, that defy human logic, and that seem to have been erected not just as temples, but as cosmic markers, portals between worlds. Science tries to explain them as human works of primitive engineering. But the more we study, the more we realize that the level of precision, scale, and purpose of these constructions surpass anything that any civilization of the time would be capable of achieving. The perfectly cut stones, some weighing hundreds of tons, fit together with molecular perfection. No cement, no mistakes, no wear. How would this be possible without the use of advanced technology? The ziggurats of Mesopotamia, the pyramids of Egypt, the temples of Central America, and even megalithic monuments like Stonehenge or Baalbek all carry the same pattern. Astronomical alignment, sacred geometry, and cosmic symbolism. Everything points to a single purpose, communication with the gods who came from the stars. The Sumerians believed that the Anunnaki ascended and descended to Earth by between these towers, and that each of them served as a point of connection between the sky and the ground. It was the place where the divine met the human. The top of the ziggurats was considered the abode of those who descend from heaven. Coincidence or literal description of landing pads? There is something that intrigues even more. On many of these structures, we find inscriptions and reliefs that show figures with wings holding cylindrical objects, similar to energy devices, rods, or even something that to modern eyes could resemble controls. These figures are almost always depicted handing something to humans. A box, a sphere, a disc. What was that? Knowledge? Energy? A form of technology that the ancients interpreted as sacred. Sumerian art was not merely symbolic, it was descriptive. Everything they saw, they faithfully recorded in stone. And if they sculpted gods with tools that shine, with clothes and helmets, maybe it's because that's exactly what they saw. But there is another point that connects everything. Sound. Several temples and pyramids have inexplicable acoustic properties. The internal chambers reverberate at precise frequencies, capable of inducing altered states of consciousness. Some researchers believe that these constructs were designed to channel sonic, vibrational energy, perhaps even interdimensional frequencies. Could these locations be contact instruments designed by the Anunnaki to communicate with the cosmos? Modern science itself already knows that the universe is made of vibrations and that each particle responds to a specific frequency. Did the ancients already know this and used sound as a tool to access other dimensions? The most curious thing is that in practically all ancient civilizations, the gods are described as masters of frequency. In Egypt, Thoth was the god of words and creative vibration. In Sumer, Enki was the lord of wisdom and the awakening sound. In the Hindu Vedas, the universe was born from Om, the primordial sound. What if these stories talk about the same thing? What if the secret of the gods is not just technological but vibrational? Perhaps the true language of the Anunnaki was not spoken but sounded. And then another mystery emerges: the use of gold. Why was gold so sacred to the gods? Why does it appear in all ancient cultures, always linked to immortality, power, divinity? According to Sumerian texts, the Anunnaki needed gold to restore the atmosphere of their home planet, Nibiru. But what if gold had another purpose here on Earth? Gold is an excellent energy conductor, resistant to corrosion, reflective of light and radiation. It could have been used in advanced technology and not just as decoration. Perhaps the gold-clad temples were not only beautiful, but functional, acting as antennas to channel cosmic energy. Now imagine planet Earth as an energetic network, and each temple, each pyramid, functioning as a node in this network, a kind of communication system between the sky and the ground. Ancient civilizations knew where to build, always at points of high magnetic energy, aligned with specific constellations. The arrangement of the Giza pyramids, for example, reflects Orion's belt. The Nazca lines point to Sirius. And in each of these connections, the same pattern of worship of the gods that came from the stars. None of this is a coincidence. It's planning, it's legacy. But there is something even more enigmatic. In several places around the world, there are underground tunnels connecting temples and ancient cities, as if they were secret routes. Some stretch for kilometers, with mysterious chambers and walls covered in inscriptions about those who return from heaven. Why this obsession with returns? Was it just a myth or a prophecy left by the Anunnaki themselves, a promise of reunion? What if these portals are still active? What if some of this technology, buried for millennia, still vibrates deep within the earth, waiting to be awakened? This would explain the inexplicable phenomena observed in certain regions. Underground sounds, lights in the sky, abnormal electromagnetic fields. Perhaps the signs of the return of the gods are already happening, but few notice it. Now think about what that means. If the Anunnaki created humanity and left their buildings as markers, perhaps their true purpose was to guide us back to them. Perhaps each temple, each ruin, each symbol is part of a cosmic route, a map left so that when humanity once again reached a certain level of consciousness, it could rediscover its creators. And when we look at the advancement of modern technology, the space race, experiments in quantum energy, discoveries about dimensional portals, it's hard not to feel like we're approaching that point. Perhaps without realizing it, we are retracing the path of the gods. Now I want you to think about this. If the Anunnaki really left clues on Earth, are we prepared to decipher them? Is the world ready to face the truth about its origins? Write here in the comments if you believe that ancient temples were energy portals or simple religious monuments. I want you to comment on the phrase, "I follow the map of the gods," if you too feel that everything the ancients left was a message, a call to those who still seek the truth hidden among the stars. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, because what comes next will reveal the secret of the portals that still exist on Earth, and what could happen when they are activated again. If the ancient buildings were the map left by the Anunnaki, then the stars are the compass that guides this map. Everything ancient civilizations did seems to point heavenward, as if they sought to maintain a direct connection with the cosmos, not out of worship, but out of remembrance. They knew that the gods came from there, from a specific point between the constellations, and they believed that one day they would return along the same path. And this point, according to Sumerian records, was the home of the Anunnaki. Nibiru, the wandering planet, the world that orbits the sun in a cycle so long that its return only happens every thousands of years. The texts describe Nibiru as a luminous celestial body, sometimes visible, sometimes hidden by the veils of the firmament. A planet with its own atmosphere, its mountains, its seas, and a gravity that shaped beings of proportions and strength much greater than human ones. The Sumerians believed that when Nibiru approached Earth, it brought with it great transformations, climate change, catastrophes, extinctions, and perhaps looking at the cycles of history, this belief does not seem so absurd, because, interestingly, the periods of humanity's advancement and destruction seem to follow a pattern. Civilizations flourish, reach technological or spiritual peaks, and then suddenly disappear. What would happen if this planet really existed and was now approaching again? This idea sounds like fiction, but think with me. What if the return of the gods is not symbolic but literal? What if ancient civilizations knew, through direct observation, that something colossal crossed the sky at fixed intervals? They called it the planet of the gods, the home of creators. The most intriguing thing is that according to the ancient tablets, the approach of Nibiru caused gravitational disturbances so intense that they shook the earth. The flood may have been one of these events. And perhaps the signs in the sky that many cultures say they saw before the catastrophes are the manifestations of this star upon its return. This would explain why so many religions speak of a cycle of the end, of a cosmic judgment, of a return of the gods to evaluate humanity. The term apocalypse itself, in its origins, does not mean destruction but revelation, the moment when the truth is exposed. Now imagine if this revelation was not metaphysical, but physical. If, at some point in the future, Nibiru does indeed become visible again, tearing the sky with its reddish light, what would happen to the world? Religions would collapse, governments would lose control, science would be forced to rewrite the very origin of life. And most of all, we would have to face the fact that we were never alone. The Sumerians said that the Anunnaki were divided between those who wanted to help humanity and those who wanted to dominate it. If they returned, which side would prevail? Would they be our protectors or our masters? This is the question that echoes among researchers and believers to this day. But there is a detail that few realize. The ancients didn't just wait for the return of the gods, they prepared for it. Pyramids, ziggurats, megalithic monuments, they all functioned like cosmic clocks, marking the cycle of return. Each alignment, each axis, each shadow, calculated to the millimeter, served as a warning to future generations. And according to some translations of the clay tablets, humanity should recognize the return of the Anunnaki through three signs: an abnormal increase in solar storms, a noticeable change in Earth's climate, and the awakening of star children among men, people with a different sensitivity, more intuitive, more connected with the invisible. And now tell me, do you feel like something is changing, that the world seems more tense, more accelerated, as if we are approaching a turning point? Are we witnessing the beginning of this cycle? Science itself already recognizes that there are anomalies happening in the solar system, variations in magnetic poles, changes in solar behavior, inexplicable interferences in planetary orbits. What science calls anomalies, the ancients would call signs. Maybe they were right all along, and what we consider myth is, it's just knowledge that we forget to interpret. And most disturbing, what if the Anunnaki never completely left? What if part of them remained here, in secret, watching, guiding, shaping humanity's destiny until the day their home planet came closer again? This would explain why elites always keep an eye on space. Billionaires investing in space technology, governments sending probes to the farthest reaches of the solar system, telescopes being erected at strategic points on the planet. This is not scientific curiosity, it's preparation. They know something is coming. And if you look closely, you will see that the whole world seems to be silently reorganizing itself. Political changes, wars, manipulation of information, control over energy and technology. Everything seems part of the same movement, an attempt to centralize power before the truth arrives, because when it arrives, there will be no more hiding. The ancient Sumerians believed that the Anunnaki communicated with their chosen ones through dreams and visions, that when the time approached, these messages would happen again, awakening ordinary people who carry the code of the gods in their blood. Perhaps this explains the increase in people reporting strange experiences, vivid dreams about stars, sounds that seem to come from the sky, feelings of déjà vu that recur in historic places. What if this is all part of the same awakening? Perhaps the return of the gods does not begin with ships descending from the sky, but with memories being reborn within people. Genetic memory being reactivated, DNA vibrating at forgotten frequencies, preparing humanity for an inevitable reunion. If this is true, then we are not just witnessing the return of the Anunnaki, we are becoming like them. With each generation, we become more conscious, more technological, closer to what the creator gods were. It is as if we are being led, step by step, back to the origin, back to the divine condition that we once possessed. But perhaps this evolution has a price, because just as the gods were divided between light and darkness, humanity also seems to follow the same path. Technology, which should free us, also imprisons us. Information, which should unite us, separates us. And all of this seems to echo the original conflict, Enki and Enlil, creation and control, freedom and obedience. It's as if history is repeating itself, but this time we are the protagonists. And when the cycle is complete, when the planet of the gods aligns again with Earth, perhaps it will not just be their return, but a judgment. A time when humanity will need to choose, continue serving the shadows of the past, or fully awaken to its celestial nature. Now I want you to think and tell me, what if all this is real? If the signs are indeed happening, if the sky is already opening for the return of the creators, are you ready to face the truth? Leave a like if you believe that we are closer than ever to discovering the secret of the gods. And write here in the comments the phrase, "I await the return of the Anunnaki," to show that you are part of those who are ready to see beyond the veil. Because what comes next will show you the evidence that links the star gods to the hidden power that rules the world to this day. Everything that has been said so far about the Anunnaki, their arrival, their science, their domain, and the possible genetic inheritance they left, begins to gain new meaning when we look at the way the current world is organized. Because if they were really here, taught, created and controlled humanity, what prevents them from still exerting influence over our destiny? Nothing disappears without a trace. And the truth is that, even millennia later, we still live under the shadows of their systems. The modern world is just a sophisticated version of what they established. Hierarchies, control, and the eternal quest for power. A direct inheritance from the gods who descended from heaven. Think about it. Every empire, every religion, every system of government in some way repeats the same pattern. An elite at the top, holders of knowledge and wealth, and a base of millions of people who serve without understanding the greater purpose. This model, which has been repeated since Sumer to this day, is no coincidence. It is continuity. The Sumerians served the Anunnaki. We serve invisible institutions, systems that dictate our behavior, consumption, and even thought. The difference is that now control is not done through stone temples, but through technology and information. And perhaps most disturbing is the realization that all of this may have been predicted from the beginning, a plan that was never stopped. The ancients said that the gods created kings to rule in their name, men who carried part of the divine blood. And, interestingly, this idea behind reversed the story. European kings claimed to have sacred bloodlines. Pharaohs were called sons of the sun. Spiritual leaders were considered intermediaries between heaven and earth. And to this day, global power is concentrated in families whose origins are nebulous, but who share ancient symbols: eyes, pyramids, serpents, eight-pointed stars, the same icons that adorned Sumerian and Babylonian temples. Coincidence? Or a silent message, a reminder of who really stands behind the throne? The pyramid symbol, for example, appears on coins, flags, logos, and power structures around the world. At the top, a single eye, the same all-seeing eye from the temples of Enki and Anu, which represented the god's gaze on humanity. Now think, does this eye still observe? Or did he never stop observing, just swapping the altar for a global system of digital surveillance and control? The cameras, the satellites, the algorithms, everything observes, records, analyzes us. It is as if humanity has unknowingly recreated the same type of monitoring that ancient texts describe as the supervision of the gods. And there is more. When we studied the Sumerians, we realized that they did not see the gods just as creators, but as managers of resources. Each one had a function, controlling water, winds, fire, gold. Today, the same thing happens, just with other names. Corporations control energy, food, technology, information, and, in a way, life itself. It is as if the powers had changed their faces, but maintained the same essence. What if these modern corporations were, directly or indirectly, the reflection of the ancient divine houses of the Anunnaki? An extension of a domain that began millennia ago? Maybe the gods never needed to physically return. Perhaps it was enough to influence specific minds and families, to shape societies over time, until the entire world became exactly what they wanted: a controlled, monitored, and predictable global system. And when we look around, it's hard to deny that we've already come close. We live on a planet where freedom is just an illusion, where we believe we are independent, but we follow invisible rules, where we worship progress without realizing that the further we advance, the more dependent we become. But there is a detail that many ignore. The Sumerians also spoke of resistance. Not all humans accepted the rule of the gods. Some fled, hid, and swore to preserve true knowledge, that which the Anunnaki did not want revealed. These men and women were the first rebels, the guardians of forbidden wisdom, and over the centuries its heritage spread into secret societies, cults, groups of thinkers who tried discreetly to keep the flame of consciousness burning. Do you notice the pattern? There is always one side that dominates and another that awakens. There are always those who want to be God and those who want to be free. And perhaps we are at that point in history again. Perhaps the global awakening that is talked about so much today is actually the same process that took place in ancient Mesopotamia. The moment when man realized that he was more than a creation, that within him was the same power as the gods. This is the great irony. The Creator gave man the power to free himself. And that is exactly what those who have inherited the throne of the gods fear, the complete awakening of humanity. Modern technology, in all its glory, can be the tool for this or the ultimate prison. On the one hand, it connects us and makes us understand the universe. On the other hand, it isolates and controls us. It is a current version of the ancient duality, Enki, the god who liberated, and Enlil, the god who dominated. Light and shadow, knowledge and control. And you, have you noticed how these forces still act in the world today? Look at the crises we are experiencing, environmental, political, social. They seem to be the result of chance, but they all follow the same script. Destruction followed by reconstruction, chaos followed by order. The ancients called this the divine cycle. What if the same people who started it continue to guide the process? It's as if the world were a big board, and every human movement was just a calculated move by the same beings who created it. Now imagine that everything we know, economy, culture, science, is just a reflection of the ancient model of the Anunnaki, adapted for modern times. Each human advance may be just one part of a much larger plan, something that began thousands of years ago and is only now beginning to be revealed. And perhaps this plan is reaching its decisive point, the moment when man will finally realize who really controls him. But in the midst of all this, there is a light. There is always a small, silent group that seeks the truth, that feels that the world is not what it seems to be. People like you, who look beyond the surface, who question, who feel that there is something deeper guiding our history. Perhaps this group is the continuation of those ancient guardians who rebelled against the gods, and if so, then the awakening has already begun. Now I want you to reflect and tell me, do you think we live free or still under the rule of the old gods? Leave your like if you believe that there are hidden forces controlling the world, and write in the comments the phrase, "I see the legacy of the Anunnaki." If you also feel that what we experience today is just the reflection of a much older history, a history that has not yet ended, and sign up now, because in the next part we'll dive into the ultimate secret, how the very descendants of the creator gods could be walking among us, hidden in broad daylight. If the heritage of the Anunnaki still lives among us, then it is not just in monuments, symbols, or ancient books, it is in people. This is perhaps the most uncomfortable and at the same time most fascinating part of this mystery. Because if the creator gods really mixed their blood with that of man, the inevitable result is that part of them remains alive, walking silently among humanity. The idea seems unlikely, but think about it. Wouldn't it be exactly what the ancient scriptures said? The sons of the gods joined the daughters of men and were born giants, renowned heroes. This phrase, present in several cultures, is much more than poetry. It's a record, and possibly a confession. Sumerian texts speak of a direct lineage of the Anunnaki that remained on earth even after the departure of the gods. These descendants were instructed to maintain control of knowledge, laws, and resources. They were called priest kings and had the duty to preserve the balance between the human and the divine. But as time passed, power corrupted purpose. The lineage that was supposed to protect humanity began to protect it from itself, creating a structure where only a few have access to truth and ancestral wisdom. This is where the concept of royal blood comes from, the idea that certain families rule by divine right. Now look around. The same families that have controlled global power for centuries maintain a lineage of marriages among themselves, avoiding mixing blood. The official story says this is because of tradition or status. But what if it's more than that? What if it is a conscious attempt to preserve an ancient genetic heritage, the DNA of the creators themselves? The difference may not just be in wealth or influence, but in something deeper, something invisible. Perhaps some of these descendants still carry fragments of Anunnaki genetics within them, and if that's true, these people have not only inherited power, but also a responsibility, or a curse. There are historical and even modern accounts of individuals with abilities beyond the ordinary. Intellectuals, charismatic leaders, people who seem to see the world differently, almost as if they have an instinctive connection with something that the rest of humanity cannot access. Is it a coincidence that many of them share similar traits? An unusual intelligence, surprising physical resistance, a worldview that transcends the material. Maybe it's not just talent or chance. Maybe it's inheritance. The Sumerians believed that the direct descendants of the gods had the mission of keeping the bridge between heaven and earth alive. They were seen as guardians of the light of knowledge, responsible for reminding man where he came from. But over time, that mission was distorted. Knowledge became secret. Wisdom became power. And power, as always, was concentrated in a few hands. Since then, humanity has been led by a small elite that dominates, controls, and manipulates, not just governments, but the very perception of what is real. And there is an even more intriguing detail. In many ancient cultures, gods and their descendants were described as enlightened, beings whose presence radiated literal light. Today, the word enlightened survives as a symbol of wisdom, but also as the name of secret groups that supposedly guard forbidden truths. Coincidence? Or a linguistic heritage that denounces a past that never ceased to exist? Perhaps these organizations, these hidden societies, are the missing link between the ancient world and the modern world. They maintain rituals, symbols and traditions that date back to Sumer, Babylon and Egypt. The all-seeing eye, the triangle, the winged serpent, the radiant sun, all elements that have belonged to the Anunnaki since the earliest records. Do these groups really believe they are serving the ancient gods? Or do they know that they are in fact his descendants? Some texts mention that the Anunnaki themselves left instructions before leaving. They spoke of a time when divine blood would be diluted in humanity, and when that happened, a new cycle would begin. The children of the stars, spread loved by the world, they would begin to awaken, recognizing each other by instinct, being attracted by knowledge, mystery, and the desire to understand the invisible. Have you ever felt that you belong to something bigger, that you have an inexplicable connection with the cosmos, a feeling that you carry something ancient within you? Maybe this isn't imagination. Perhaps you too have a fragment of this heritage. This idea may seem absurd to those who live trapped by conventional explanations, but the truth is that there is something in us that defies logic. The ability to dream, create, love, and seek answers outside of reason is something that no natural evolution completely explains. It's almost as if human beings were designed to transcend. What if this divine programming is proof that the Anunnaki still live through us, pushing us to follow the same path they followed millennia ago, the path of creation and ascension? Think also about the coincidences surrounding global power. Why are so many leaders, scientists, and influential figures fascinated by space, the stars, the idea of extraterrestrial origin? Why do so many space missions have names linked to ancient gods? Apollo, Artemis, Orion, Prometheus. It is as if, unconsciously, we are paying tribute to our creators. And the most intriguing thing is that the technologies developed today, genetic manipulation, artificial intelligence, space colonization, are, in essence, attempts to imitate what the Anunnaki did to us. We are becoming the new creators. But there is a risk in this. History shows us that whenever man gets too close to divine power, something happens. Catastrophes, falls, restarts. It was like that in Sumer, it was like that in Babylon, it was like that in Atlantis, if that really existed. Are we about to repeat the same mistake? The signs are there, clearer than ever. The accelerated advancement of science, climate change, global tensions, collective spiritual awakening. It's like the world is being prepared for something. Perhaps the return of the gods, perhaps the final fusion between man and the divine, or perhaps the beginning of a new cycle where the Anunnaki DNA finally manifests itself in all its potency. Now I want you to think deeply. What if this is all real? What if the most powerful families in the world are actually direct descendants of the ancient gods? What if their blood still circulates among us, silent but active, shaping the course of humanity since the beginning? Leave your like if you believe that there is something greater guiding human history, and write in the comments the phrase, "I carry the blood of the ancient gods." If you also feel that inside you there is something that comes from far away, something that no history book has ever explained, and sign up now, because in the next part we will explore what the texts call the final awakening, the moment when the blood of the gods and the human spirit finally meet again, and nothing on earth will be the same again. If the blood of the gods truly runs among us, then what we call awakening is not a future event. It has already begun. Slowly, silently, it manifests itself in the minds and hearts of people who feel there is something beneath the surface, something that the official story insists on hiding. They perceive patterns that others ignore. They question what has been imposed. They feel an inexplicable attraction to ancient civilizations, to stars, to mysteries that defy reason. It's as if a dormant part within them begins to move, responding to an ancient call. A call coming from the same point where, millennia ago, the Anunnaki descended. These people are not dreaming, they are remembering. Because what the Sumerian texts suggest is that human DNA is not just biology, it is memory. A living record of everything we were, saw, and inherited. And there is evidence that this DNA, when exposed to certain frequencies, sounds, emotions, specific vibrations, begins to activate, releasing dormant information. It's as if, inside each of us, there is an ancient library locked, waiting for the right key. And perhaps this key is not technological, but spiritual. Modern civilization is proud of its advances, but ignores the fact that the greatest mysteries are not in distant galaxies, but within human beings themselves. We are the real enigma. Why do we miss a place we've never visited? Why are we fascinated by stars that seem to call us by name? Why did cultures so distant in time and space share the same symbols, the same stories, the same gods? It is as if humanity were a shattered mirror, reflecting fragments of a forgotten truth. And now, little by little, these pieces are falling into place again. The Sumerians said that the Anunnaki created man in their image, but veiled the eyes of their origin. This means that humanity was made to forget Usa, to obey, work, serve. But over the ages, something changed. Perhaps the very divine essence within us has begun to break through this programming, and that is exactly what the current powers fear, the awakened man. Because the awakened man does not kneel, he does not accept being a slave, he does not need intermediaries between him and the divine. He is the very reflection of the divine. Notice what is happening around you. The spiritual search intensifies, science approaches metaphysics, religion tries to reinvent itself. Everything is converging to the same point, the reunion between knowledge and faith, technology and spirit. This convergence is what the ancients called the return of the golden cycle, the period in which humanity would remember who it really is. And when that moment arrived, The rule of the elites would lose strength because true power would once again be in the hands of the awakened individual. But as always, there is resistance. Just as Enlil tried to stop man's advancement in ancient times, modern systems do the same today. Control of information, manipulation of beliefs, constant distractions, everything to keep humanity disconnected from itself. Have you ever noticed how the world seems increasingly noisy, chaotic, saturated? It's no coincidence. Constant noise prevents inner silence, and it is in silence that awakening begins. There are those who say that the return of the gods will not be physical but vibrational, that the Anunnaki will not descend in ships but in consciousness, that instead of looking at the sky, we should look inside. Maybe they never left because they live in us, in every heartbeat, in every flash of intuition, in every idea that seems to come out of nowhere. Perhaps awakening is not about meeting the gods again, but about remembering that we are their descendants. Imagine if everything we believe about human origins was just the first layer of a much deeper story. That evolution was not only biological, but also spiritual, guided by intelligences that shape not only the body, but the soul. This would explain why we have the unique ability to create, imagine, and transform. We are, in a way, gods in the making, and perhaps this is the point in the cycle where we need to decide whether we will use this power to build or destroy. Because just as the Anunnaki were divided between light and darkness, humanity is also divided now. There are those who awaken and seek wisdom, and there are those who use knowledge to dominate. The battle of the gods never ended. It just changed stages. Today, it happens within each of us, between the consciousness that wants to free itself and the ego that wants to control, between love and fear, between remembering and forgetting. The ancient texts said that when the awakening began, the signs would be visible to everyone. The sky would change, the earth would shake, and dreams would become messages. Maybe this is already happening. Have you ever noticed how more and more people talk about synchronicities, about feeling spiritual calls, about seeing repeating numbers, hearing sounds coming from nowhere, seeing visions of space or ancient temples? They are manifestations of a cosmic memory coming back to the surface, and those who resist it will feel fear, while those who accept it will feel a power they have never experienced before. This is what true Anunnaki awakening means, not worship, but consciousness. The recognition that humans are the link between heaven and earth, the living channel of creation. When this happens on a large scale, everything will change. The economy, politics, science, the very notion of reality, because the world was built on humanity's ignorance of itself. When this ignorance ends, the game ends. Now imagine the impact of this. Billions of people realizing at the same time that they carry the same power that they once attributed to the gods. Systems collapse will be inevitable. The fear that the elites have of this awakening is the same fear that Enlil had when man learned too much, because true knowledge cannot be controlled. He frees, and that is exactly what is happening now, silently, through each person who begins to question, investigate, feel, connect the dots. Perhaps this is the true final judgment that religions talk about, not a punishment, but a choice. Between continuing to serve the shadows of the past or finally walking in the light of truth, between repeating the cycle or breaking it, because the return of the gods may actually be the birth of the divine man, one who remembers, awakens, and takes the place that has always been his. And if you're here listening to this, it's no coincidence. Somehow this message found you because there is something inside you that recognizes this truth. Perhaps a fragment of the same ancient blood, a spark that slept and now begins to shine. Don't ignore this. Question, explore, feel, and when you feel it, share it. Awakening spreads like this, from consciousness to consciousness, like fire through dry straw. Now tell me, do you feel this calling is real, that there is something inside you that is starting to wake up? If so, leave your like right now, because this helps this message reach more people who need to hear it. And write in the comments the phrase, "I awaken to the legacy of the gods," to show that you are part of this movement. And subscribe to the channel, because in the next video, we will reveal the final evidence. The moment when the veil between myth and reality will be torn, and the secret of the Anunnaki will stop being just history and become present. If you've come this far, it's because something inside you feels that this story goes far beyond what the books say. So before leaving, do the following. Subscribe to the channel now and activate the bell, because the next video that is already appearing on the screen will take you even deeper into this mystery. Leave a like if this content made you think differently about the world. This really helps to spread this message to more people who need to wake up. And I want to invite you to leave a comment below with the phrase, "I saw it to the end because I'm waking up." So I know that you are part of this group that is not afraid of the truth. Now, don't pause, click on the next video and continue this journey with me. What comes next will completely change the way you see the history of humanity.